Welcome to The Fair Fight, a show for you and your fight against corporate power. I'm Max Miller, an antitrust attorney, a corporate skeptic, and a prairie populist. And joining me, former FTC Commissioner Alvaro Bedoya, a man who took on corporate power for you, and the president fired him for it.
Every day we're told that the defining fight of our lives is Democrat versus Republican. We're told to worry about the left versus the right. Max and me are a lot more worried about the money at the top versus all of us underneath. And we think that needs to be a fair fight. So we're taking your questions, sharing your stories, and getting you answers about your rights in this economy.
So put on those boxing gloves, tighten up those laces, and enter the arena, because it's time to join the fair fight. Welcome to The Fair Fight with Alvaro and Max on a Friday live chat that we're doing. And today we've actually got a really fun topic. I don't know if fun is the right word, probably be more infuriating topic, but one that certainly needs to be discussed, which is about energy consumption and the effect on our utility bills. We're appropriately calling this hashtag $! Utility bills. You know what that means. But anyway, Alvaro, it's Friday morning. How are you doing this week, sir?
I'm all right. It's a rainy day out here in Maryland. My neighbor recruited me to help him with unskilled labor around. He's building one of those backyard saunas in his backyard, and
I
so
thought it was going to be something like good, like a greenhouse or something like that.
oh,
I
dude,
was super
saunas are amazing.
excited.
Saunas are amazing.
I forgot that
So
you're like out. Just
oh
Alvaro,
yeah.
tell him about your love of saunas.
I mean, they're the best thing ever. So quickly on my love of saunas. As I get older, all the things that used to make me feel good hurt me. So I used to love to run. Now my knees are shot. I used to like to have a glass of wine a day. And now, if I have a glass of wine a day, I don't sleep and I feel
Yeah.
terrible. And so, because my brittle, aging body can't do these things anymore, I have discovered my Rockville's gym here in Maryland has it's a public gym. You pay $8 to use it, so there's no crazy monthly membership fee.
That's like
And
just $8 per session.
8 or $9, and you get pool, you get gym, and you get sauna. And during the summer, you get outdoor pool, outdoor like play water park area for the kids, hot tub, indoor pool. This is all the city of Rockville that does this. And so when I build and work out, I get to hang out with nice old retirees in my sauna that I've paid $8 for, and I leave a completely new human being, and it's good for you. It makes me feel good, and it's good for me.
I'm
And that is
skeptical, man.
why I love sauna, and you should too.
But now, but your
And
neighbor, so you've been doing some physical labor this week
I
because
have
you.
not. I have
uh,
not been doing physical labor because my neighbor recruited me, but it's raining, and
uh,
I think some concrete was gonna be brought to the neighborhood, and he
but they have
recruited me not to do any skilled labor because 'cause I'm bad at that. I'm not like you. He recruited me to just move wheelbarrows from the corner to the location of the sauna, um, so that he and other skilled people can build it. But this is what I call sweat equity, so that I could just show up and
you have
use the sauna when I
fun
want to.
because I know exactly
Yes.
what your motive is to do this. But it's funny, Alvaro. I've always thought that that would be an excellent like gym. Is one where you just like move heavy stuff, like for a project.
I
Like
mean,
it's like, hey,
it's called actually working for a living. Like, that's what people who don't push paper, unlike me, do.
well, that
Yes.
That's why I try to do that stuff. We're gonna talk about it in a little bit, but one of the things that I've done this week was I, replaced the toilet in my house. And I gotta tell you,
I'm in
toilets
awe,
are
Max. I'm in
toilets
awe.
are heavy M MFs, man. I do not like trying to carry a toilet, but, carried it downstairs, did all these, getting it to the curb. It's actually being outside my house right now waiting to be picked up by the Metro Waste Authority, here in Des Moines. So, anyway, but, yeah, I wanna talk a little bit about this week. I had a couple of fun things happen this week, Alvaro.
Tell me.
Well, I don't know about fun, but last night I watched my Nebraska Cornhuskers play in the Sweet 16. First time the Cornhuskers have ever played in the Sweet 16. Now, just so everybody knows, my parents went to the University of
Right.
Nebraska, so I grew up a huge Cornhusker fan. I went to the University of Florida, so I'm also a Gator fan. And I
But you're
live in the
not an
state of
Iowa fan, even though you're, like,
I live in the state of Iowa.
extremely
I
Iowan,
love the state of Iowa. I love the state of
but you
Iowa,
root against them
but I
like a frickin'
hate
turncoat.
I
Okay.
hate the Iowa Hawkeyes. I hate them, and it's
So,
like
like the
my
Yankees.
they are like the Yankees in Iowa, right? And it's
Okay.
always like, and look, I mean, I'm sorry for my Iowa friends that are undoubtedly, gonna encounter this at some point in time, but let's be honest, Iowa fans are so smug. They are so smug and they're so arrogant, and their team has never really won anything, right? But it's like they act like they are Duke or
Okay,
that they
I'm
are.
gonna give away my lack of knowledge. Isn't the women's Iowa
They were
basketball
great because
team, like,
they produced
the
Caitlin
best?
Clark.
Yeah. It
Uh,
was like
no,
Connecticut
not
it
the
was like UConn and them, right? Or no?
no, because even Caitlin Clark never won a national title.
Didn't know that. Didn't know I got the
Yeah.
impression she did based on all the hype. Okay,
No,
so I'm
no, no,
embarrassing
no, she
myself,
got
but yeah, okay.
so what was it? Because that was that whole, Angel Reese, though that she did because they played I'm trying to remember that NCAA tournament. I'm pretty sure that Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese met in, like, the Final 4 or something like that,
Okay,
but then Iowa lost in the final. I think
okay.
was it to South Carolina? I'm sorry
No
for
idea.
women's
No
women's
idea.
fans.
I was
But
born
anyway,
watching soccer. I was raised watching soccer, so,
love
uh,
soccer too, man.
soccer and Yvonne Lendl and Stefan Edberg and Pete Sampras. Sampras, as my dad would call him, and, he was
Tennis, you're a
obsessed with
tennis
Pete
fan
Sampras.
too? Isn't
I mean, it's just what your parents like. Let's not get too precious about this. We like what our parents liked when we were 5 to 12. That is what we like. And so I grew up watching the World Cup whenever the World Cup was on. Obsessed with Argentina, obsessed with Brazil, and then like Sundays or whenever it was, my dad would wake us up and turn on Yvonne Lendl, Stefan Edberg. We caught the tail end of Jimmy Connors. Um, then Pete Sampras, Courier Courier, well, as my dad would call him. And that's what my brother and I would watch. And so that's what I grew up watching. No
Alvaro,
basketball.
did you ever
No,
have your heart ripped out of your chest watching a game?
not really, man. Not
See,
really.
that's I
Yeah.
because I mean, when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I lived and breathed college
Did
sports.
you? Okay.
It was like I was obsessed with it. It was when Nebraska won national championships in the '90s, '94 and '95. Like,
Yeah.
I just was a fanatic.
All
And
right.
for me, last night, I've been a Nebraska basketball fan since I was a kid, and this year, they were, like, good. They were
Okay.
legit good. They were a number 4 seed in the tournament, and
Okay.
they're playing Iowa, and as I said, I went to the University of Florida. Last
Right.
week, Iowa beat Florida,
Right.
upset them, 9
Yeah.
seed over a 1 seed, and look, Iowa deserved that game. I do think that there are problems with the reffing in that game too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Iowa just doesn't seem to get called for fouls. Um, but last night, Nebraska was up, they were up by 10 points at one point in
Yeah.
time, and I swear the referees put their finger on the scale. And this is I'm just gonna say my piece here, because I've been calling it, and I think sports fans, if you're out there and you love sports and you're starting to, like, kind of see unfair reffing in different contexts, we have to wonder, is all the proliferation of sports betting,
Yeah.
is it gonna
Oh,
compromise
absolutely.
sports?
Absolutely.
Because there's too much economic incentive. Like, there's too much money that is going around these games. And it's not even like you have like I hate to call them legitimate because I don't think they should be, but you have like the legitimate channels of sports betting where it's actually acknowledged to be a bet, right?
Mhm.
Which is like DraftKings and all of what's the other one? I forget,
I wouldn't call
FanDuel.
DraftKings legitimate, but yeah, or
No, that's what
FanDuel
but
legitimate.
what I'm
Oh,
saying is
yeah.
that it's like you're actually placing a bet on the game. So you have that whole
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
But now we have these prediction markets like
Yeah.
Kalshi, and there's so much money to be
Oh, yeah.
made
Right.
off of these games and what happens,
Yes.
and you can't help but wonder if, like, kind of a, moderately paid referee in
Yeah.
sports, like, starts seeing ways that they can make money,
So
and
you heard it here first. The ref threw the game, rigged the game against Nebraska,
well, let me
thanks
just
to all
I'm
my
gonna give
sports
you
betting.
so I was at a bar last night watching this game with all Iowa fans because 'cause I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, right? So I was like the lone Husker fan in the bar. And I was calling in the first half. I was like, I'm like, there's problems with this refereeing. Iowa's not getting called on fouls. And it was like a discussion, with
Oh,
my bar
interesting.
patrons at
Yeah.
halftime. How many fouls did Iowa have in the second half?
How many? I
The
know enough about
whole
sports to know
second
that's not normal. That's
the
not
whole
normal.
second half,
Right.
Iowa had, and
Yes.
that's what allowed them to come back. They were playing super physical. They were basically, like, tackling the Nebraska players, like, when they would go up for a layup and nothing was getting called. There was at one point in time where an Iowa player just shoved a Nebraska player to the ground and, like, nothing was
It didn't
called.
get called? Alright.
Yeah, and
So
so it's like
are other people calling foul, no pun intended, on this?
I'm sure some are.
It sounds like no.
But this is that my heart was ripped out of my chest. But
Alright.
look, at the same time, I'm gonna take a step back, I'm gonna say Iowa's a great team. The Iowa basketball
Alright.
team
You're
is a
like, "I
great
still
team.
want friends. I still want my
I
neighbors to like me.
I
I'm
am
not a
cheering
terrible
for
person."
Iowa State the rest of the way.
Alright. Okay.
Iowa State is also in
Oh!
the
Oh,
Sweet
good
16.
for
Yeah, no,
you. Oh,
my
wow.
3 the 3 basketball teams that I like, Florida, Nebraska, Iowa State, and all 3 were in
Oh,
the NCAA tournament, and so now Florida and Nebraska are out,
okay.
killed by Iowa.
Okay.
Now but Iowa State's on the other side of the bracket, and, so, I mean, if it was an
Just I
Iowa
just realized that Iowa and Iowa State were different things, so, uh,
oh, man.
I
Oh,
didn't
dude.
grow up with this stuff, man. I didn't grow up
So
okay.
think about it this way, I University of Iowa is like the white collar school, for,
Oh.
like, all the professional jobs,
Oh,
lawyer. There's no law school at Iowa State, like, it's like
okay.
a very professional
Yeah.
oriented university.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
remember you remember that, UHG CEO who was shot? He
I
was a
do.
he was a University of Iowa grad. It's like so it's a
Okay. I
professional
f
class.
Alright, I feel like we went to a dark place. Let's go to a
Well, no,
happy
I'm
place.
just but I say Iowa State, on the other hand, is like agricultural college. So it's like
Got it.
it's like
Got
the
it.
farmers in Iowa tend to love Iowa State, and, like, so
Yeah.
I'm with the Iowa farmers, man. I'm cheering on Iowa State.
Alright, so let's go to a happy subject, which is
Yeah,
the rulings against Facebook, Meta, and Google this week. You had, and I actually think, Max, we should cover this in an upcoming
yeah,
episode. I will not won't be able to do this next week, but maybe a following episode we will. We had two huge rulings, and I just want to offer a word or two on why I'm so excited about them. So there was a New
great.
Mexico jury that held Meta liable for not keeping kids safe online. It was kind of focused on child safety, protecting them from child predators. $275 million verdict. And then there was a California jury who basically said that Facebook and YouTube as products were not safe for kids because they were addicting them. And they awarded to a single plaintiff, to one now 20-year-old, but at the time teen girl. Her initials, it's Kaylee GM. They awarded her $6 million total. Now, there's two things that I think people need to sit with that are really exciting. And go
Can I
ahead,
can I just ask a clarifying question because I
tell
haven't
me.
followed this too much? The California verdict is a products liability verdict, right?
Yes, and
The product
negligence,
so
I
it's
believe.
product design? Like, essentially that it was
Yes,
designed to be.
precisely, precisely. And so and some people are like, "Oh, it's free speech," and I'm not even gonna deign those arguments as
Al
worthwhile.
Also,
Most
corporations should not have freedom of
right.
speech.
Correct, correct. The
My
idea that
my opinion.
a no, 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 no. I mean, the idea that a liability immune corporation, which is not a real person, should have the rights guaranteed to flesh and blood human beings by James Madison in the late 1700s is laughable. And this was a generation of people, George Washington, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, who loathed monopolies. The Boston Tea Party was an act of protest and looting against a crown granted monopoly. The idea that James Madison, author of the First Amendment, wanted to protect a trillionaire company like Facebook from designing products that make kids hate themselves, hate their bodies, and want to hurt their bodies is banana land. It's Mars. I mean, it has no bearing on reality, even though the Roberts Court has bought these arguments hook, line, and sinker. I will point out, in contrast to the Rehnquist Court, which was the court before Roberts, Rehnquist was very, very friendly to corporate America.
Yeah, he
He
was.
thought that corporate speech should be subject to corporate quote unquote speech should be subject to a fraction of the protections that this court thinks it should.
Well, and
So,
can we
yeah,
just point out too that even our speech as individual living, breathing human beings, it's restricted too. We can't do speech which harms other people. Right? We can be
right,
held liable for our speech
right,
if it incites violence. If it causes
right.
other people to resort to violence,
Yeah,
like, we can be held liable for that. So it's the First Amendment is not an absolute protection
no,
against
no,
consequences for your speech. So
right.
even if we buy the argument that a corporation deserves, like, freedom of speech, it still has to come with limits.
That's right. And so let me quickly point out two things as to why this verdict is so special. I'm a guy who was, I was Al Franken's chief counsel from 2009 to 2014. I was on the Senate committee um, that considered a lot of this stuff. He, Senator Franken, charged me with building the Senate subcommittee on privacy, which was one of the first critical voices against Google, Apple, Facebook, held some of the first aggressive hearings against this company. Let me point out back then, there were these lavish parties, Christmas parties, holiday parties, where you would go, and I went once to the Google one. I never went to the Facebook one, and it would be like free drinks, free food in a fancy hotel. And I remember there would be these oversight hearings, and you'd show up, and senators would literally be like, "How do you think you should be regulated?" And so what jumps out at me, Max, is these were trials that were in the weeks, right? Measured by months, right? And when you have a mom, a dad, a school teacher, regular people sitting on juries, you can't lobby a mom or a dad. You can't lobby the school teacher, right? These are
That's why
people who are
corporations hate jury trials. They prefer to have a bench trial.
amen. That is right. They want an elite judge who is kind of part of their professional club
Yeah.
to consider their cases instead of juries of regular people. And so Congress has never done anything. And it pains me to say, because I was part of Congress for 5 years as a staffer. Congress has never done anything meaningful, literally never done anything meaningful to check the power of these companies in addicting kids and teens. State legislatures have tried. All right. So California passed the age appropriate design code. Spencer Cox, the Utah governor, has
Yeah, he's been great
done
on it.
anything he could to try to check this stuff. Do I agree with Spencer Cox and everything? I don't. But like he is trying to protect kids and
But
teens.
when you see
Yeah.
somebody on the other side who shares your values about something, like,
Yes.
we
You
need
got
to
to
put
call
the
the, yeah,
party
that's
we
right.
gotta put the
That's right.
party
Amen.
divide
That's exactly
away
right. That's
because it's
exactly
like
right.
we talk about the ideas, and
Yeah.
if we agree on
Yeah.
ideas, then we need to work with them.
That's 100%
Um,
right. And that's why Governor Cox is someone to pay attention to. Anyways, these moms and dads did it in New Mexico and California in the course of 2 months. And, um, and all
Well,
these
I'm sure that
fancy elected
the
officials,
the case took longer than 2
the
months, but
case
it
took longer, but the jury sat, and I'll check this in a
yeah,
second, for a few months,
yeah.
right? They did this full time for a few months, and they held these companies liable for what, $281 million, and that's just starting. That's the
Which
number
is
one
what?
thing I wanna
Like, I mean,
flag
they
up.
they make that back, like, what? I
Right.
have no idea how much, but it's like,
Oh, no,
that's
no, no,
not
it's
much
it's a
to a
drop
bit.
in the bucket, but it's about to rain, alright? And so
Yeah.
New Mexico was one of 50 states, plus the District of Columbia. That was just liability in one state. KLEGM was just one plaintiff out of what could be millions of plaintiffs across the country. You multiply 6 million by millions, 6 million by millions, you have a lot of money. And so my hope is that it's an existential threat to the business model of addicting kids and teens. And I'll just throw one other thing out there. There has been this insane trend that started to happen in AI companies where Sam Altman, who ostensibly is part of a, in his words, very successful billionaire AI company, a couple months ago, and people don't like to talk about this because it's gross to talk about it. He said, "Oh, we're going to pivot into erotica. We're going to offer this functionality to our users." Now, let's take a step back. Most wildly successful companies don't pivot into pornography, right? Just kind of a trend,
If you're
right?
producing something of
Costco
value, you don't
Costco's
have
not
to
like, "You
resort
know
to
what,
pornography.
guys? We're gonna do porn." Right? Like, it just doesn't
You don't
doesn't
you don't know
happen.
about the Costco back room, Alvaro?
I don't, and much as I have serious problems with that company,
It's in bulk. It's in bulk.
it's in bulk, doesn't exist, right? The Costco back room does not
This is
exist.
a this is a joke, disclaimer.
Right, right, and so but OpenAI was like, "Oh, we're gonna pivot into erotica," right? Character AI has put
I've
out
heard about them.
chatbots that it purports or are labeled as psychologists or therapists, right?
Yeah.
Now, this information is a couple, maybe a couple months old, so it's possible that they've taken these things down. A couple months ago, Reuters reported that Meta internal documents said that teenagers should be able to have quote unquote sensual conversations with their chatbots. This was official Meta documents, okay? And so my hope has been that if these verdicts came down the way they have, these companies who were clearly pivoting into this space would reconsider. And we just
Yeah.
got news yesterday from the Financial Times that that appears to be what's happening. And
These are
so,
good market effects. Like, this is
yes,
the plaintiff's
yes,
bar is what keeps capitalism honest.
yes,
Right, the plaintiff's bar is such an important part of capitalism, and so to
yeah,
see all these, like, highly paid, like, pundits who try to, like, carry the water for Meta, Amazon, and all those companies, like,
right.
they are basically trying to denigrate one of the most important checks on the excesses of capitalism. And then I start to worry, it's like, do these people actually care about capitalism? By the way, gonna have to take a pause here for a minute because, ladies and gentlemen, we are having our first ever guest on the the Fair Fight podcast, the live chats. We have the mayor of Stamford, Texas, joining us today to talk about utility bills and data centers, and that is James Decker. James, how are you doing? Thank you for
I'm
joining
great.
us,
How are you
sir.
guys?
As he says that, we lose him. We'll see if James comes back here in a second. But anyway, folks, we wanted to invite James. James Decker is online. He's somebody that I've interacted with a few times, on Twitter. And we wanted to talk about utility bills. And one of the things that we thought about was who could know better about utility bills than the mayor of a town in rural Texas, right? So we're gonna wait a minute for James here. Alvaro, do you wanna finish up your thoughts on
Yeah.
while we wait for James to come back?
It's that this looks like it's about social media, these verdicts, but my hope already being borne out because the Financial Times reported yesterday that OpenAI has dropped its incipient pivot to quote unquote erotica, that these AI companies are going to realize we cannot do with the new generation of young people and adults, by the way, what we did to teens in the 2010s. And so that is my hope, and knock on wood, that is what we're gonna see. It won't just be about social media; it will be about how these billionaire and trillionaire AI companies, because Meta is a trillionaire company, can play fast and loose with our emotions, with our romantic attachments. Right? These companies are persuading people that they are your AI boyfriends and girlfriends when they are neither girls nor your friends, as an FTC staff attorney pointed out one time. So that's what I'll leave it there. And how do they get these things up and running through their data centers? So maybe that's a good moment to
Yeah, well, James,
go ahead.
can you hear us? I've turned Oh, he's joining. It looks like he's joining from his phone, maybe?
Yep, there we go. I logged onto my mobile. I knew that
Hey,
would fix better. That would work better. So,
Hey, very good, James. No worries about that. I think the problem that we're having here with our connection is that, data centers and tech companies are siphoning off all of the data that's coming to us so we can't have this conversation.
that's right.
That's
Well, the good
Hey,
news is I was able to listen to y'all on the recording just a minute ago while I was trying to get logged on my phone, and I was agreeing with everything you said. So good stuff, y'all.
oh well, why don't we start there? Yeah, tell us. So you probably saw there was big jury verdicts against Meta, against Google in California, and against Meta in New Mexico, holding the company liable for what it's done to kids and teens. I'm your constituents, your moms and dads are living this every day. Your young people living this every day. Yeah. How did this news hit your ears, Mayor?
Well, I will tell you, it comes in an
Mayor Dick.
interesting time in my own life. A little bit of a reckoning I'm having with uh, the internet. I kind of had a late, halfway, few weeks into Lent decision to just deactivate my Facebook and go temporarily and go dark for a little while just to break the scrolling habit because and even when I deactivated like for a few days the compulsion to click that just pull up my phone and click the app and even I was like wait I'm not even on this it's bad y'all and in Stanford, I have used since I've been mayor in 2018. I have used Facebook to communicate with our citizens a lot in case of emergencies, like a utility issue or when we had the big power grid failure back in 2021. And folks would say like, "Hey, not everybody's on Facebook. Not everybody gets these messages." And I say, "Look, I don't want to be beholden to Zuckerberg any more than you do, but this is the best way to communicate with the most people the fastest." Well, in the last
yeah.
6 months or so, we actually got an app called Savvy Citizen. Big fan of those guys. They were great to work with us, where we can send out text message, or, push and email updates to people about utility issues. And we've been using that. And that has allowed us to not have to rely on Facebook. And so if people want to know what's going on, they can do that. And I got to thinking the other day, during my outage because on Facebook personally self-imposed because I thought, what is going to be the plan? Because I've done a lot of, some of my writing that I've done started on Facebook, just like keeping people updated what's going on in the community. And I get to thinking like maybe, I can't sit here. I've grown to loathe Facebook personally to see what it's done to me. Other people worried about my own small children one day, trying to keep them off of it. And I don't know that I can, in good conscience, say, Facebook is terrible. Don't be on it, but I'm going to be on it for to communicate for
Right.
for city meetings. And I would say my wife would probably have guessed that it would take about this long for me to make the Windleberry reference, but I think back to Windleberry's why I am not going to buy a computer, and the man was right. He was.
He
Hmm.
was.
So I don't know that the horse is out of the barn with us on buying a computer. I mean, we're all on computers here, but at least we can strike back against social media because Alvaro, you're right. I mean, it's just a predatory monetization of everything about our lives, our shopping preferences, our scrolling, our habits, our friend interactions, our mental health, and they don't care. I'm just
Yeah.
strip it and they strip it. That Zuckerberg and all the rest are perfectly fine to strip our society, our well-being for parts, make as much money off of it as they can, and whatever comes of it, oh well, sorry about you.
Well, it's kind of akin to something like drug dealing. right?
Yeah, it
Like there
is.
is a market. There is a market for drug dealing. People want to consume drugs, and they do it. But we can still put restrictions on that market, right?
Yeah.
Because of the harm that generates from that market.
That's exactly right. And I don't know if y'all are aware of Ben and Aaron Napier. They have the hometown show on HGTV. They're in a small town in Mississippi. They've actually created an organization, and it's like Osprey or something like that. And they kind of started out of their friend group with their parents with kids their age to keep their kids off of social media. And it started a nonprofit to kind of here's the tools and how we do it. And I think it's very important. And I've got an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old that's gonna be 5 in 3 days. I don't wanna sell her short because she wants everybody to know she's like 5. But, that's what my wife and I talked about, like, you know, we wanna keep them off of social media as long as possible, but we're also gonna have to model it too because we can't say, "Yeah, we're scrolling Facebook while we're sitting here visiting with
Yes.
y'all, so, but y'all don't get to be off until you're teenagers." That I don't think I can do that and be, you know, a logically consistent parent.
So, gents, if I could take us to our topic today, because we've had this is an excellent topic, and I think we can circle back to this issue about like the product that a company like Facebook is putting out. Because what we really wanted to talk about today was rising utility costs, right? And Alvaro and I, we actually have some personal stories that we didn't get a chance to tell. So, Alvaro, do you want to go first and maybe tell people what happened to you this
Yeah,
past month?
sure. So I'm sure you've had constituents that live versions of this, Mayor Decker, but I had a and this happened in our old place, but we moved about 6, 7 months ago, and we have been paying water bills of a couple $100, which out here is pretty normal. And then we got a water bill for $1,250.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, yeah, and so now it was that month where out here there were some pretty intense cold snaps, the longest, cold spell in a long time. Um, and that was clearly driving part of it. Now, I had some family over, and so I was like, "Hey, did we use much more than we normally do?" So I went next door to my neighbor, and he said, "Oh, no, I got a bill for $900." And I know for a fact he's one of those dads I aspire to be, which is the dad that sets the thermostat at, like, 60 degrees or something and is like, "Put on a sweater." He's a sweater dad, right? And so they
Yeah.
got a bill for $900.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah, no, that was my wake-up call to this. I have a lot of colleagues where I work at AELP, American Economic Liberties Project, been working on this for a while. That's when I was like, "Okay, maybe I need to pay more attention to our utility work." But Max, how about you? What have you
Well,
been living?
for me, no, I mean, number 1, just in the last month, my electricity bill doubled, right? And I don't think my consumption has increased that much. So, look, I'll be honest, haven't done the work to figure out if they just raised the rates, and pass that on to me or whatever, but the bill doubled from what it had been the previous month. And then my water bill, this one was really interesting to me because I got hit with $1,000 bill, but
Oh,
it was not for 1 month, it was for the previous year that they apparently had a battery fail on a electronic, device that sends, like, the meter reading, to the company, so they were providing estimates of water usage for a year, and then they started pestering me being like, "We need to get somebody in to replace this device, so that we can get accurate readings," and I got them in, they changed it out and all that, and then they're like, "Oh, but actually you used $1,000 more worth of water than we thought you had." Now, one of the things that I found most interesting about this is that this device that they use, like the waterworks here in Des Moines, like they have to buy it from a company. And you can't just replace the battery in it, right? You have to replace the whole unit, which is like $150 per unit. Like this is what the tech was telling me. And I'm just like, gosh, you got to imagine that all of that like public money going to a private entity, right? That's providing this technology. It's like that gets passed on to the water consumers.
Mhm.
Like, I'm like, "Is that why my water bill is so much higher now? Is so they can pay out to these private companies that supply them with this convenience for the customer?" Anyway, but as part of that, Alvaro, we were talking about me changing a toilet out. I 'cause
I'm in awe, Max. I'm in
I
awe.
called well, I called the water company, to be like, "WTF, mate?" Why
Did you
am I
say,
gonna
"Mate"? Is that an Iowa?
that's no, that's me when I'm trying to keep from cursing. But anyway, they told me, they're like, "Well, you potentially had a leak over this past year." Right? And so they told me to, like, test my toilets, put water food coloring into the water tank, right? So that you could see if it was leaking. And I ended up deciding to replace one of the toilets. And then they're gonna like maybe give me a discount because I did that, right? They're gonna see if there's a change in the usage based upon fixing the leak. So, but anyway, I had to install a toilet all by myself, and I did a pretty darn good job, if I do say
Look
so
at you go.
myself.
That would be an unspeakable disaster if I tried to do it. But Mayor Decker, how are you confronting this? How are your folks? Are they getting hit with these insane bills? What are the
Well,
big challenges you guys are facing in Stamford?
w- well, first of all, as the mayor who presides over a city water utility system, I cannot fathom people getting a water bill and things changing and not knowing
Yes.
about it. We we have people that will get a leak and go back to Facebook, but we'll have people who will their water bill will go up for some reason. They left a hose on or they had a leak or something, and then they'll
Yeah.
post on Facebook about they raised the water rates on me and I didn't tell me. And then we said, no, here's your usage, here's the rate, here are our rates, here's how it was calculated. Um, we actually so Google and something that we can talk about in more detail, but Google is building a data center about 15 miles northeast of town, next to our lake.
Oh,
So Stanford is one of the few municipalities in West Texas that owns and operates our lake with no other partners. We're not part of regional water authority or anything else. We built our own lake in the 1950s. It's got about twice as much water capacity as we're actually using in it. Over rural decline and population decline. And then over the years, we had sold water to a neighboring community that is a deal that fell through in the early 2000s due to some poor leadership. So we had a lot of excess water. And Google came to us when they were building it near the lake. Everybody was convinced because they wanted to steal the water from our lake, but it was because there used to be a power plant out there. There's some major substations in and out from big high capacity transmission lines. It was in a solar project next to those substations, so it was a good spot for them to build a data center. So they came to us about water, and that was about a year ago. And we asked them, and I said, "Tell me about this data center, what your plan is." And they said, "Well, first of all, it's air cooled, not water cooled." And I said, "That's good because if you told me it was water cooled, the conversation was going to be over right now. So now we will get to keep having this conversation." Um, so over about a year, we've made a deal to sell to them about 170,000 gallons a day of water for where once they scale up. That'll be the kind of the peak usage for warehouse, office purposes. The kind of the closed loop cooling. That will be about $1 million in revenue to the city at its peak, which would be about a
mm,
20% increase in our city budget. So that's a good deal. But as part of this, and by comparison, one of the towns that we were selling water to in the early 2000s when that deal went away, we were selling between 2 and 400,000 gallons a day of water to them. So, I mean, we've got a
okay.
history of selling way more water than this since the lake was built in the 1950s.
I just so can give people some context on this, like 170,000 gallons
Yeah.
is much less than like a typical data center would use. Because if you're talking about a typical one, it's going to be using between 500,000 and 5 million gallons per day,
Okay.
depending upon the scale of the data center. So
Yeah.
170,000 per day
Yeah,
is
and to be
relatively
honest,
small.
like, and even if I'm naturally skeptical of all things because I think that's my job for our citizens. But even if I thought they were going to try to do some sort of bait and switch and move it to some sort of water cooling or something, the reality is 170,000 gallons a day. That's not going to get them very far down that road, and that's water that we've got to sell, and it's not open ended. And to put it by comparison, the city of Stanford uses between 5 and 700,000 gallons a day in our own system on a
Okay.
normal day, about 1 million gallons a day in the summer on a hot day. So we're not talking about jeopardizing our capacity, or it's not using more water than our citizens are using. So it's just a good industrial user like we had when there was a power plant out the lake because they used water out of the lake out there for cooling. Um, But as this process came up, we realized that we needed to recalibrate our water rates, partly because we did not have a rate for large scale industrial users out of town, and we were not going to give them our rate that we're paying to our charging our
Yeah.
citizens, obviously. So we had to recalibrate, and people were convinced that we were raising the water rates on our citizens to pay for it. I was like, well, no, they're not doing that. We have to build a treated water line out to their data center. It's about 15 miles, but they're building it. We told them it's like non-negotiable. And yeah, they're like, yeah, that's fine. $10 million
Yeah.
water line on a $1 billion project. That's a rounding error for them. Um, so we actually, as we recalibrated our water rates to deal with some of the RV parks and stuff that have come in town as well, we didn't have it scaled up. It was like two tiers, and we went to like 5 tiers. So that for we're trying to get some grant money from the state for infrastructure, and we wanted to show a curtailment to encourage conservation. That the more you use, it costs you.
Right.
It's not just a one-time ability to use
Oh,
water
it's
for.
progressive.
Exactly right. It went we made it significantly more progressive than it was. And then as part of that, I'm actually somewhat proud that we actually ended up slightly, just ever so slight, but I mean, it was like 20 cents. We actually lowered the minimum charge per month. So that way, the people that say, well, you're raising the
Good.
minimum water rates, I can say, no, actually, we slightly lowered it for you.
Oh,
Let me just jump in and point out two ways in which this is different from a lot of the energy conversations and why that might be. Number one, this is a municipal water utility. This is something that the people have control over, and you're a part of that, right? Number
Exactly.
two, when it comes to electricity, usually people don't know this. Like regular human beings, moms, dads, families pay higher per unit electricity rates than data centers and traditional industry. And so traditional industry like a warehouse, a factory pays the lowest rate. Data centers pay somewhere in the middle, usually. Sometimes they pay that rock bottom rate. And it's regular families that pay the highest rate. And so because of this control you have over the lake, over this water utility, you're able to flip that. You're able to let your people pay less while these guys are picking up an increasing tab that creates incentives for them to use less. I'm not wearing my hat is off to you. And I am that is amazing. And naturally I want to talk about electricity and energy too to see if you're working similar magic there. But I mean, how do your folks in Stanford feel about the deals you've cut? Do they see it like you, or you're starting to say some people are like, "Oh, you're raising my rates," but how has this gone over in town?
So, mixed feelings. There are people that are, just mad about it in general, don't like data centers, don't like anything, don't like
Yeah,
any change. And that's okay.
understandable.
Like
right, right,
there's a small segment of people that, don't want us to improve our infrastructure, but don't want anything to change. And like, guys, can't do that.
right,
I'd say the
right.
prevailing sentiment in this town is like, hey, like, I don't, it's kind of odd. We never thought we would see Google building a campus here, but, if it'll help, it's kind of it's a deal you gotta do that if they're in this area, we gotta find a way for our citizens, both local government, local businesses to benefit from it. And that we've got the water. This is the whole card that we had for years, knowing that we had more water than a lot of the areas around us, including some of the larger cities. We need to make sure that we benefit from it. So I would say most folks see it as a means to an end that, hey, if this does create some good jobs, good industrial jobs, and it does create some new revenues in the community, then that's what we really need.
So one thing that I want to jump in here is that, you know, my concern for you, James, right, is in the future, like Google has a lot of power, right? They have a lot of resources and they have so that,
Mhm.
when you get into bed with them, right, are you concerned at all about maybe down the road that they basically breach the contract? Do something that could, leave a bill for the city of Stamford. And while you might theoretically have claims at law, right, to take on Google in court, right, and try to enforce the contract that you signed with them. There is something that's in the law that's called strategic breach, where
Mhm.
some companies basically decide, like, it's okay for me to breach a contract that I had, because I can afford, to defend that breach, and basically I'll come out ahead by breaching the contract. So anyway, I just wondered if you worry at all because that's my concern about municipalities and private companies working out deals is that inevitably the private company tends to have more power than the city.
It's a cost of doing business. It's easier to do that. One of our other favorite topics of all of us is the meat packers. I mean, they get these gigantic fines levied against them. They just build that into the budget instead of being because
Yeah.
pay a few $100 million better than being broken up. Who cares? I think anybody that's in any local government official is in any sort of business with a large tech company like this, somebody that's got extreme political power, would be foolish not to have that concern. What we have been very careful of, and also just from the general boomtown threat, because a lot of booms can leave a community worse off in
Yep.
the end, um, especially if you start ramping up for stuff. I think about the guys that I've known that got a whole bunch of oil and gas royalty income coming in and built their new standard of living based on that income, and then the income dropped out from underneath them, and then their standard of living they couldn't afford it anymore. So
Yeah.
as we have seen things happen in town, we've been very careful. The city has not expended any money that we don't immediately get back, or that's going to put us in a bind in the future. So, for example, with our
Yeah.
as the construction is ongoing, they're buying raw water from us. Basically got a pump in the lake to use for settling the dust, mixing concrete, that sort of thing. We've gotten about $1 million out of that in the past year. We set up an ordinance for that money to allocate it expressly for the replacement of water and sewer infrastructure, nothing else. So these one-time windfall revenues are going to be used for one thing, that when you build it, you're done. Because what we don't want to do, get that revenue, you start
Mm.
hiring more employees, buying more police cars. You start a lot of some of these variable costs or these recurring costs that you can't afford to cash flow if it all goes out from underneath us. So that's our first and foremost concern. If this Google deal dries up and goes away, if the whole bubble bursts, whatever it is, we're not out anything.
Could I ask you about electricity? So they're not using water, they are using air for the most part to cool. Are you worried about electric bills? Do you have a municipal or publicly owned electricity utility that might be able to combat some of the demands and pass on any winnings to your folks, or are you more worried about that? How are you guys figuring that out?
Lord, how I wish we had a local municipal electric utility. We do not. There's a
Okay.
few small cities in Texas that have those. Stamford never did. So we
Okay.
were part of the West Texas utility system, which was built in this area, and
Okay.
then it was eventually bought by Central and Southwest, and now it's part of AEP. I am not a fan of electric deregulation in Texas. I remember when it happened.
That's good.
All it did, it just gave private equity the opportunity to come in and strip it all for parts and break it. I, I would say that I'm
Is
very concerned about electric electric bills in Texas in general. That's in general. That's
Yeah.
not something that I have control over, but I would say to Google's credit or whatever, and this is kind of a double-edged sword. They're building, they built this because they had a solar project out here next to it, and they're building another one. Um, and I refuse to call them solar farms because it's not a farm; it's an industrial facility, and words have meaning.
Right.
Um, but
Right.
so Intersect was the company that built this one out here. Well, Intersect Power, Google recently bought out Intersect to kind of bring that power in-house. My understanding from what they're doing is all of the power being generated or being necessary that's necessary for this data center will come off of these solar projects out here. So it's not going to be a net loss to power in the grid in Texas.
Interesting.
But which sounds good,
Interesting.
and
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's a good thing, but you've also got a booming population in Texas and other stuff, so every one of those that you build off of the grid that doesn't add to the demand, you're still not answering the demand issue. So these new solar projects, they're either supplying the data centers or they're helping the overall grid in Texas. They're doing one or the other, and if it's not solving both, you've got another problem. So I do see that as an issue. one thing that I say cautiously optimistic, hopeful about is WTU had a power plant out at the lake, like I talked about, and it's still, they built it when we built the lake, and they dismantled it. It was an old natural gas fired plant. They dismantled it in the early 2000s when they got rid of some of those old plants rather than retrofitting them. But it's all still there. I mean, they tried to sell the property, but couple hundred acres that's basically all substations and transmission lines. It's got a pretty limited marketability. um, I heard in town, sometimes I'd hear more in town that I knew more about what was going on in the project than I knew about myself. And we told because Google, it's funny. There's been a lot come up about NDAs and stuff on these data
Yeah.
centers, and local officials just wouldn't talk about anything. And Google gave us an NDA, but I told them, I was like, look, guys, I'll sign your NDA. And I'm not going to talk about anything that's proprietary on the science, on the technology, all that, because nobody cares. But everybody in town already knows what's
Yeah,
happening, and if NDA can't conflict with the Public Information Act, and if it becomes public information, it's
Right.
public information whether you got an NDA or not. And I said, also, the only people in town not talking about your project are those of us that have an NDA. Everybody else in town is talking all about it. So I don't know what secrets you are trying to keep. So they thought that was kind of interesting for them to move into a very rural community like this. But I've heard, people said, "Hey, I've heard that Google's sniffing around at the power plant site, the old AEP power plant," and I said that would be great. They want to put in some gas turbines
Mm.
or something out there and add power generation. It would make all the sense in the world for them and us, and it probably create some good jobs too. So I think, the Stargate, Lancium, whatever you call that project over at Abilene is about 35 miles from where I'm sitting right now, and I have to drive past that thing going in it to and from Abilene because that's our nearest major city. And, they're putting some gas turbines
yeah.
out there at that thing. Like, I think that's stuff like that is the answer, especially in this part of the world where you got free, but essentially free and just infinite levels of natural gas. Put some more power on generate that stuff. It sure beats solar projects, in my
Uh,
opinion.
Forgive me, Mayor Decker. You're talking to a guy who grew up with Stargate, meaning a late 1990s movie that involved teleportation across the universe. And so
It's
you're
not quite
telling
as
me
fun
that
as that.
Abilene has Stargate?
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Okay, what's going on?
So this is and I think it's the largest data center in the world or America or what, but it's a open AI. It's part of that project.
Oh.
It's the big open AI Department of Defense
Oh.
thing. Yeah, Sam Altman himself was in
Got it.
Abilene when this for this deal. So
Woof.
I didn't go over to try to shake his hand and tell him I was a big fan because I'm not. But um, and so Abilene has
Yeah, no, I
Dyess
can't
Air
can't
Force
imagine you are
Base.
given yeah. Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
So Abilene has Dyess Air Force Base, which
So
is the home of the B-1 bomber, and it's actually gonna be the home of the new
okay.
B-21, the next generation bomber. So it has kind of been
Oh,
declared strategically, and it was a strategic air command base during the Cold War. So this thing is,
yeah,
the OpenAI deal is very much connected to Abilene's hub as a defense
yeah.
location.
So let me throw out there just a few electricity dynamics because I keep on coming back to the difference between how you are able to structure water consumption in a way that just totally makes sense for your constituents in Stamford, right? Like we're getting these one-off purchases of, 1 million gallons, etc. during construction. We spend that in one-off, one-time improvements to our infrastructure. We're not going to make people dependent. We're actually going to let people pay less, right? All this control you have when it comes to water, when it comes to electricity, I wish, right, exactly like you said, you had that control for your folks because I know you would cut deals that would be good for your folks, but there's a degree to which you don't have control. And what I've seen out there is number one, electricity rates are discriminatory in the opposite direction, right?
Mhm.
Number two, 70% of these electricity utilities are owned by investors. Only 30% are those municipal electricity operations, like the one you were saying you wish you had. Um, a couple other things is that in those investor backed utilities, investors are actually guaranteed certain rates of return that can be up to like 10%,
Yeah.
right? Utility
Yeah,
commissions will approve guaranteed 10% rates of return to Wall Street investors that are backing like building new power lines. And those are some pretty sweet deals. I would say,
yeah,
like, our money is as a family, it's all public. It's in like treasure, it's in T-bills and index funds, right? You don't get 10% on any of that stuff. And so what people have been calling for is number one, you cut that guaranteed rate of return. And I would turn everyone to, there's a guy named Brian Shearer just put out a paper on this. You can Google it, Brian Shearer, cutting the cost of utilities. Knock that down from 10% to 7%. Um, Guarantee, flip the discrimination in the other direction or flatten it so that everyone pays the
Mhm.
same rate, but ideally make it so that regular people pay less, right? And the big dogs pay more. He also pointed out that in a lot of these investor backed utilities, people end up paying for like the corporate jets, the private jets, the PJs that these executives use, the lobbying expenses, they can get passed on to consumers. So there's a number of things that we can do. And one thing that I'm not sure if he mentions, but we all need to be aware of is that a lot of these utility commissions have a revolving door with industry. And
Yes.
so you go to the utility commission as your gateway to that sweet gig in that private equity backed company. And so these
Mhm.
are all things to start tracking. So
And
I don't know if you've already started
and
doing this.
Alvaro
Max, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
yeah, I just wanna jump in because there's a concept that everybody should know about, which is called capture. Right? And I think we can have this false sense of security when we have like a public utility board or whatever. And I want to kind of take a step back here because I just want to
Yeah.
explain something about utilities are such an interesting market to begin with because when the antitrust laws of the United States were being developed, right, a lot of people had concerns about how we deal with something like utility, like an electric grid or telephone grids or things like that. And it's what I believe Louis Brandeis coined this phrase. It could have been somebody else who coined it, but the idea of what's called a natural monopoly. And the
Mhm.
reason it's a natural monopoly is that the infrastructure cost to like actually develop it is so great that you don't want multiple companies to be like doing it. So the bargain of a natural monopoly is that okay, you get to have a monopoly over this like public good, like electricity, but you're going to submit to regulation. And so and Brandeis understood this. It was like you had to actually regulate the entity. And so when we have public utility boards that are supposed to be regulating this, making sure that it's fair for all the citizens and for the consumers of the electricity, if a big corporation or private equity or anybody with money is able to capture that board, they're able to make sure that they have influence over the people on that board, then they can cut those sweet deals, right? Which provide a big return to them. And that's like, there's varying degrees of corruption. But one of the things that I've noticed is the United States, since about the 1980s, and look, we had corruption before the 1980s, no doubt about it, right? But it's not just that it's becoming like bigger part of our lives, but it's becoming more accepted. Like, people
Mhm.
just seem to be, like, fine with corruption happening. They're fine with agency capture. They're fine with you talked about the revolving door, Alvaro. They're fine with that, and I'm not fine with
Right.
it. I want a public utility board to represent the interests of the public and not the interests of the wealthy and the corporations.
Agreed. And I think
What
it's
were we
yeah.
talking about? I was the one.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I
James.
I I
Go,
agree,
James.
and it's tough, and I mean, and you see that in Texas, because our Public Utilities Commission is the one that oversees that, and it's appointed. Those positions are appointed by the governor, and a lot of times that they cycle through that. And I know some people who've been on that board. I've talked to, had conversations with them, and for the most part, they can also be, you know, the, you can get the idealist on there, and as soon as they start getting pushback, too much pushback from the industry, the governor will just tell them, "Hey, you need to find, I'll find you another spot or something." I mean, and you've got a governor like in Texas, you've got a governor who's been in charge for over a decade, and it's the policy is firm of what the policy is going to be is firmly entrenched, and I don't know that there's a good answer for all of that, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Regulatory capture, you see that in other issues. Regulatory capture is a huge problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, James, I wanted to just give people some statistics here
Okay.
about how much electricity a data center takes. And so there's just so everybody knows, there are many different types of data centers. Um, that when they talk about facilities, right, they sometimes use how much their like hourly consumption of electricity is. There's something called like a 500 megawatt facility, which is a hyperscale. But a hyperscale data center consumes 12 gigawatts of electricity per day. And I just want to, if I could, guys, because I'm a nerd, I love
That's
movies and all of that.
gigawatt. What's a gigawatt, Max?
What's a gigawatt? You know, it's a dangerous to give me like access to tools that do fun things. So I'm gonna play this here just to give people the
Is it
concept.
a
I'm
gigawatt explainer, Max?
a gigawatt.
I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. 1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts! Great Scott! What the hell is a gigawatt?
There you
So,
go.
boys, what the hell is a gigawatt or a gigawatt, however you wanna say it? Well, as later explained in the movie Back to the Future, that was a clip from one of my favorite movies, Back to the Future. Uh, as explained there, 1.21 gigawatts is equivalent to the bolt of lightning. Right? That's what it was taking to make the time machine in Back to the Future work. And so each data center, these hyperscale data centers, 500 megawatt facilities and greater, if it's a 500 megawatt facility, it's using 12 gigawatts. So what is that?
Thought it was
Approximately like
pronounced gigawatts, Max.
gigawatts, gigawatts.
Yeah,
It's a gigabyte, right? Do you guys say gigabyte or
I'm
gigabyte?
joking. It's not definitely not a gigabyte. You
There's
got some fresh
another
facts? Hit us with a
There's
fresh
another
fact,
fact
man.
that I looked up because, in the data center context, a little bit about the cryptocurrency,
They're mining
Bitcoin, they're
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
mining for it. But the Bitcoin network, I wanted to look up just because I was interested in this. The Bitcoin network uses as much electricity per year as a country the size of Poland. All right.
Jeez.
I want you to just like conceptualize that, right? So it's like these companies or these networks, like we're talking about astronomical energy consumption that is going to things which in this I want to tie this back to the beginning of our conversation about Facebook and like what they do. What is the value to our society that is coming from all of this electricity drain? If we're talking
Yeah.
about AI or we're talking about cryptocurrency, right? What actual productivity with as making our society better is coming from these energy consuming entities?
It's a great question. And in the post-industrial, as someone who ever more believes that the industrial revolution might have been a mistake in itself, um, dispensing with the industrial revolution into where whatever we are now. I mean, where so much of what we do just putting around just pushing around paper and making fake things just for the sake of it and not giving actual value. As a side note, that's why I encourage people, we've tried to hire young guys that are graduating out of high school to go work for the city to say, hey, working for the city
Yeah.
of Stamford Public Works is one of the few jobs in America where you can drive around and show your family, look what I did today to make your life better. Lawyers and financiers and all these other people, and yes, I am a lawyer, but they don't do that. They just sit around and push paper. You can actually see what's being done. And I don't know. I mean, I have friends who are fans of cryptocurrency, and, I have I don't know that I'm convinced, and I know that people think it's a scam or a CIA op and other stuff too. But there's so much of what we're doing, and you look at between all the big chip makers and AI companies and tech companies, it's all a circular. We're generating revenue for you to pay us, so we can pay this other company who's going to pay us. I mean, I would say I would call it a pyramid scheme, but it's not a pyramid. It's like a circle. So I don't know. I think you have a great. What are we gaining from it, Max? I don't know. I've had thoughts that maybe a
Well,
lot of this, maybe there are some really super secret, defense projects going on that none of us know about. I mean, I don't think I'm dealing any trade secrets. That's just my hypothesizing, but I, I don't know. It's odd.
But even if we're talking about, like, advanced defense, one of the last, chats that Alvaro and I had was about, like, AI targeting in the Iran war and
Yeah.
how it's leading to innocent people being killed. And so
Hmm.
this is what I just want everybody to grapple with. Even if you can find, like, a use case for these technologies, right? You know, for AI, for cryptocurrency, for these energy consuming products. Even if you can point to one like productive aspect of it, we also have to, if we are economically minded, right? We also have to consider the costs. Like what comes later? You know, what are the consequences of doing that? And I just want to point out something. I don't know if listeners realize this, but when I was researching cryptocurrency and its energy consumption, you know that the country of China banned crypto data mining in the country of China in
Is that right?
2021? Yeah.
Just like they banned
Now,
paraquat
why
while
would they
also
do
selling
that?
it to our farmers.
Yeah. No,
Wait,
you're James,
what's
that's a
paraquat?
that's
Could you say a word about that?
Yeah, it's a herbicide that's used in a lot of some herbicides are
Oh.
people will talk about being toxic, and I don't, there's probably the truth somewhere in the middle. Everybody, I mean, paraquat is very toxic. I know guys that use it some on some defoliation of cotton, and
Wow.
they don't like using it unless they absolutely have to. It makes them nervous. I mean, it's got the skull and crossbones on the side of the deal. China makes paraquat. They don't allow it in they don't use it in their country. It's banned in China, but they export it to us for our farmers to use. Just a great situation there.
Oh, wow.
so I if you know, I hear conservatives often talk about the threat of China. I hear liberals talk about it too. But like if we look at China as being like our primary competitor in the world, I think we have to take seriously like what they're doing in competition, right?
Mhm.
Like what they're like how they are focusing their efforts. And one thing that I look, I mean, I'm not an expert on Chinese energy, but I do understand that they have lots of very large scale renewable energy projects. Like that their government is basically doubling down on the idea. And so I mean that clearly when you talk about the costs of like say coal plant, you know, electricity generation versus the renewable energy like solar power. And James, by the way, I wanted to talk to you because you said something about having some skepticism about like solar facilities. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Right. But if China understands that they can kind of cut their energy consumption, right? And it's, I guess it's not consumption, but their generation coming from renewable resources like wind, water, solar, and trying to eliminate bad consumption that they see? Like, are they basically trying to win the electricity war that might be the next generation?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have a tendency to say, "Look what China's doing. They don't have to play by the rules when it comes to like, emissions and environment because on some of the WTO and other stuff where they got to hide behind developing country status." And those are very fair criticisms of international agreements and how they've screwed the US for the principle of the matter. But at the same time, China is saying, "Hey, this thing is bad, but we're gonna send it to you. Maybe we ought to pay attention to that." Because if you think China
Yeah.
is a malevolent
Yeah, and
force,
yeah.
in a lot of ways they are, you gotta examine it from every angle.
And what's funny is that what you often hear, I'm not in the Beltway. Max thought I was. I've corrected him. I've
Mm.
disabused him of this notion. But we hear in
He's
the
just
Beltway is
outside the Beltway.
not just that. I'm like an hour 15 outside of Washington D.C.
So
Anyone
an
from
hour
D.C.
15,
recognizes I do
you're like
not live
5
here.
miles off the Beltway, is that right?
I'm like
James
20. I'm
understands
like
it.
20 miles away. Look, Texas distances are different, man.
So
An hour
Alvaro,
15 is like a short drive.
as a quick sidebar
What's that?
as a quick
Yeah,
sidebar, my wife lived in DC for 10 years before I met her. She went up there after
yeah,
college, came back. She's from this part of the
yeah.
world. We met the day after she got back. When we started dating,
Okay,
um, we went up to DC and met some of her friends, and she lived 2 counties over.
yeah,
And her friends said, "Well, how far apart do y'all live while you're dating?" And I said 75 miles. And some of her friends said, "Oh my gosh,
yeah.
how long does it take you to get
Right.
there?"
No, that,
hour, just totally different
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah, no, different scale, absolutely, but all I was gonna point out is over here, what you hear all the time is like, "Oh, we gotta keep up with China. We gotta keep up with China when it comes to AI." What I hear you saying, Mayor Decker, is, "Well, we also gotta pay attention to the stuff they're banning," right? You know, like,
Yes,
look, they're banning, this herbicide, they're banning Bitcoin mining in their country. All right, like, you know, if we're speeding stuff up like crazy in order to keep up with them, maybe we should also pay attention to what they say are bad for their own citizens. And I will say that like we are seeing scenarios where people are overtly adopting AI, recognizing that it makes mistakes but doing it anyways. And Pete Hegseth, this is why we have AI so aggressively integrated in the military today. He issued a memorandum in January saying, we are integrating this everywhere. Your unit will be judged based on how well it integrates it. And if we don't, you know, the cost of not doing this fast enough is greater than the cost of misalignment or the mistakes
Mm.
it makes, in other words. And so I think that's why we're seeing these schools bombed in Iran. Look, like absolutely, there's a world where AI helps people do any range of things, right? I mean, it does do some incredible things, but it should not be something that pervades everything everywhere before we fully recognize it. Look, I want to respect your time, Mayor, but I will just say, for me, the innovation you're showing in Stamford, because you control the water utility, because it's a municipal water utility, you're able to go toe to toe with Google and say, "You guys want our water? Great. These are the terms. You're going to pay a higher rate. You know, you give us these one-time influxes. We're going to use it for one-time fixes. We're not going to kind of get addicted to this inflow of this big tech money that isn't predictable and isn't guaranteed." That for me is how all of AI could be. And all of the, you know, all
Absolutely.
of this stuff could be, it's where people like you are in charge and your constituents and your colleagues are in charge. That is the future we could be living in. And so my last question to you, Mayor, is how did how did you get here? And I'm not talking about the municipal water utility, but you know, I've watched you online, you know, um, how did you come to be mayor and someone with your point of view where no, we actually don't need to follow these fat cats. You know, we can set our own road and our own path. How did the folks in Stanford get you as their mayor, such that you're not bought by all these corporate interests? And what would your advice be to other young people who might want to be, you know, a young, innovative mayor in a Texas, in an Iowa, in a Maryland?
I think it makes a big difference to be the mayor of the place that you're from, where you grew up, where all your roots are, where your family is, rather than just being a mayor of a random suburb. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but a town
No,
that
no,
that I
I
mean
think that's
is
true. Yeah.
that is your lifeblood. I mean, it's my window burying leanings that the place is the most is important. The place is the goal. The place is the purpose. That makes a difference to say, we've gone through a lot of changes. Stanford was a railroad town. It was a trading center. It was an industrial town in the mid-century. We've seen get rich quick schemes. We've seen good and bad ideas come and go.
The
And we just have
monorails.
to
Yeah.
Exactly right, and we
Monorails.
have to realize that all of those things, keep an eye on the prize, on the purpose, and Stanford has been one of those places that has been, victimized by, I would say, you throw a starving dog a bone and he'll take anything he can get, and that's kind of the nature of rural economic
Yeah.
development over the last 30 years. The state will send you all their crap,
Oof.
private prisons and other sort of, things that, "Well, here, we'll create some jobs for you, but now we don't want it in our backyard, but don't worry about that." That's totally coincidence. To view it from that prism that, hey,
Mm.
this place, we were looking for a good industrial employer when we found this one. And, we have persevered. When you grow up on the semi-arid plains west of the 98th meridian, where everything is dry and everything stings or bites or is poisonous, you know that things are just a little hard. Life is not easy, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And you just take things as they go. I think about our forefathers that settled this country in this part of the world and what it took
Okay.
to carve a community out of this place. And so you know that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that these
Hmm.
companies have gone to different places before and made promises that panned out or didn't pan out, and you just view everything kind of with the skepticism of your forefathers to say, "Hey, we're trying to build something to last
Yep.
here. If you want to be part of it, great. If not, well, I'm sure you'll find somebody else to take your money and wave in front of you." And also, I will say that I have some a little bit of as a lawyer, I would say I probably come at it from a different angle. You know, I've got several pipeline cases going on with my clients right now where I've got pipeline companies that are mad at me because my clients are the last holdout because everybody else took 10 cents on the dollar
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
when the landman waved a check at them, and we made them take us to condemnation because we're going to go get more money out of it. So out of them. So I kind of view everything through the healthy skepticism of a lawyer representing his client and advocating for their interests, and I think that makes a difference. So more young lawyers should move to rural communities, and more young lawyers should run for office. We have too many lawyers in
Yes.
James, I'm
Congress,
gonna
but not in rural
Yes.
communities.
not that's a really good point, that there should be more lawyers in rural America and fewer in Congress.
Absolutely.
Mayor Decker,
James,
where can go ahead. Where
well,
can
Ja
folks go ahead.
I just had one question. So, James, being a pipeline lawyer, I bet you're not a huge fan of the Kilo v. New London, Connecticut case.
Oh my gosh, you know, that I remember reading that case when I was in law school. It came out when I was in college,
Ex
and also
Same here.
I thought about
Yep.
that you know, in use of eminent domain in Stamford, which we have not at this point in my time, but, you know, there may be some issues that happen. It's a terrible case. It's awful, you know, but I will say in Texas,
For
we're
people,
accustomed.
can I just explain?
Please do.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain Kilo v. New London, basically a private company being able to use the government power of eminent domain to take private property for private benefit. It's a case that turned the idea of eminent domain completely on its head. It's certainly not in line with the Constitution. And all it has really done is allowed for private money to essentially use the power of government to take people's private property.
But I'll answer your question there too, Alvaro. In Texas, it's
No,
even
no, no,
worse
no,
because
get in there, sorry, I just wanted to yeah, you could. Get in there, go.
look up common carrier status in Texas. Pipelines are the worst. A pipeline has eminent domain status merely by identifying itself as a common carrier, as the ability to just identify itself as having common carrier status by checking a box on its application with the Texas Railroad Commission. And it doesn't even have to show that other companies' substances are going into the pipeline, just that it could be open to them if they wanted it. If they wanted it. So I'm dealing with one that's a pipeline it's a 30-mile pipeline within 2 counties that's gonna go from one station to another in this one company's oil field that they're claiming eminent domain status and condemnation authority because they're a common carrier. They're not gonna put anybody else's oil in it, but trying to get the Texas Supreme Court to overturn that common carrier status in Texas is it's impossible. So, that's fascinating. Y'all really wanna get
I
wound
see
up
it.
about
I see a
eminent domain.
future I see a future podcast here, James, of you coming on and,
I'd love to,
telling
guys.
us more about eminent domain law.
Yeah, so where can people find me? I'm on Twitter at James Decker
Yes.
2006. That's my college class year. That's my Hotmail account too. So I'm still a big Hotmail guy.
That's a
Um,
blast from the
Oh,
past.
gee, yeah.
exactly right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you can find me at westof98.substack.com. That's where I do most of my
West of
writing. And
98.
as I try to reckon with the terrors of social media, I'm gonna try to be more deliberate in whatever I put, that not trying to be as clever on tweets, or maybe still on tweets because Twitter still is insane, but it's still fun and I've made a lot of good connections there. But also
Like
doing
this
more
one.
focused writing on my Substack rather than elsewhere. So check it out. Check me out there. It's free to subscribe.
Amen.
James, thank you so much for joining us today. This was an excellent conversation, and I'm really enjoying the fact that you and I got a chance to connect with each other, and I hope this isn't the last time.
Absolutely. I'm a fan of both of you guys and the work you're doing.
Thank you,
Thank you,
James.
sir. Have a great day.
Y'all too. See ya.
That was a lot of fun,
Oh,
Alvaro.
he was terrific. We gotta have him back.
I think probably in the moving forward with the Fair Fight podcast here, I think we're going to try to have a lot more people who are actually participating in markets, right, in different capacities. Um, Alvaro and I, one of the things that we loved about the roles that we had at the FTC, much more so than anything that we did within the agency, I think was getting out and meeting people across this country and finding out that, even if you have different ideas, I wanted to talk about this early on, but then he jumped on. Uh, what do you think I have in my kitchen right now?
I have no idea what you have in your kitchen right now.
I have 30 pounds of Louisiana crawfish in a cooler in my
Are
kitchen
you doing a
to
crawfish
do.
boil?
I'm doing a crawfish boil this
No
weekend. It's my birthday week. It's
way.
actually Amanda and Maya's birthday weekend, and so we are going to have a crawfish boil.
Oh,
And
I
these
have a
are live
T-shirt to
crawfish.
show you.
But Amanda and
It's
my birthdays are pretty close to
right.
each other. But anyway, you have a
My bad.
some people call them crayfish, some people call them
Crawfish.
crawdaddy. I grew
Crawfish.
up calling them crawdaddies.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
In
so
upstate New York, we call them crayfish, but yeah, down in Louisiana, they're called crawfish, yeah.
but the reason I was bringing this up, and I do want to see your T-shirt.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit about, we worked with the Southern Shrimp Alliance.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
because that was probably one of my favorite experiences
Yeah.
at the FTC was getting to know a few different fishermen along the Gulf and realizing that, look, I tend to identify myself as a liberal, though, obviously I think I'm more of an issue-based thinker, right?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily say that I fit all into one category. Um, but, the people that I met down in the Gulf area, very different perspectives on things. But the truth is not that different,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
and particularly when it came to ideas about, corporate power, um, when it came to ideas about how government could be helpful, there was a lot of agreement. And I think that one of the things that you and I can do, Alvaro, to
Yeah.
really kind of help to heal this divide that we have in this country is just talking to more people
Yeah.
from different backgrounds, from different perspectives. Because the truth is, we have much more in common with people
That's right.
than we have difference. And I believe this very firmly. Corporations and the wealthy have an incentive to take the small differences between us and drive a wedge between us, turn neighbor against neighbor. Because as long as we're fighting each other, we're not fighting them.
Let me offer some thoughts. We are getting a group of listeners, weekly listeners, which is a ton of fun. And to folks who've been following along, our process here, we are going to start doing some more experiments. So basically, Max and I started doing these Friday hangouts just to figure out how stuff works, right? Because he and I have been guests on plenty of shows, but it's a very different animal to run your own show. So that was kind of the first just beta test, soft launch, etc. The thing we've been doing in the background are these quote unquote car talk episodes where we get questions from our audience, we get questions from online, we bring in experts, get them to answer those questions. And in that way, we're cutting episodes with Cory Doctorow, Jennifer Abruzzo, our buddy Iowa corn grower and Iowa Farmers Union member Josh Mansky, ag antitrust superstar Basil Musharbash, and the pediatrician from the University of Michigan, Jenny Radesky, on social media. But the thing Max and I have started realizing is the magic we're trying to go after is how this sometimes esoteric, sometimes way too technical body of law that's supposed to protect regular people against mega powerful corporations, how to bring that to life. Because in those rooms, when we're meeting with the Southern Shrimp Alliance, when, in Biloxi, in Biola Battery, when we are meeting with the wholesaler on the outskirts of Salt Lake City or a labor union, in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, this stuff comes to life. And you see how it is this thing that's about really important stuff about our ability to control our futures, control our destinies. That stuff comes to life in a way that talking head conversations or wonky, law review articles, much as I love my law professors working on this stuff. That's what we want to bring to you. So we're going to start trying different things with the show. We'll have more information on that as it rolls out. But let me just point out one thing. I don't mean to be a broken record here, but what I loved about that conversation with Mayor Decker was how DC is really great at pointing out how stuff goes terribly and stuff goes wrong.
Yeah.
What I loved is to hear him say, well, guys, we own the water utility. And so when Google comes knocking, we set the terms for that. We got our folks to pay less. We got Google to pay more. And not just that, they're paying more the more they use. So their incentives are right. And just picture that idea applied to everything else we talk about, right? When there's lots of, small businesses, when there's local control of things, how these interactions with these unspeakably powerful corporations could be flipped on their head. And so that is the kind of thing that only starts coming out when you meet the flesh and blood humans who are in the middle of these fights. And that's what we want to start trying to highlight. So I do need to pop off for a second or get off for a second. Um, Everyone, you can reach us at ask@thefairfightpod.com. You can basically subscribe to the show by leaving your email, dropping it at thefairfightpod.com. Max has brought up my crawfish boil t-shirt. You should zoom in on the middle
I
thing.
got I'm gonna try here,
I have
sir,
some
but it's
important disclaimers. I was born and raised Catholic. I taught Sunday school. With every passing year, I do become a little more spiritual, just like you, Max. But I was in New Orleans recently for Mardi Gras with my family, and I discovered this T-shirt, and it is a reimagination of that famous Last Supper painting, except instead of wine and bread, there is a massive pot of crawfish being poured across the table, and if you would and if
I'm trying,
it's
sir.
okay,
It's
man,
like
it's okay.
it's because of the way that the website is set up, it
Don't
zooms
worry
in
about
on
it. But
the
this is
yeah.
for those listening on the podcast, this is a reimagination of the Last Supper, but with a crawfish boil instead. And the way you can tell this is legit, Max, is that there's a little blue canister, little blue shaker of Tony C's on the table, which
Tony
is which
Casciarella.
is
Well, how do you pronounce
which
his name? Casciarells or
Tony Kacheries, I think. I have no idea
Kacher
because
oh,
everyone calls it
Kacheris, yeah.
Tony C's, but that, of
Tony
course, is the
C's.
spice for the crawfish boil. That's on the table. That's how you know this is real. This is from a, locally owned
I got a
store.
10-pound bag of spice along with my,
But is it
my 30
but is it oh, for the boil.
it's not
Yeah, yeah,
Tony
yeah, for the
yeah, for
boil.
the boil, but it's just like, it's the Cajun seasoning
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
put
yeah,
into
yeah,
the
yeah.
boil, but,
I'm impressed, but let me quickly call out the independent business that put out this T-shirt. It's called Dirty Coast. They've got stores across New Orleans. Great company, has a bunch of fun stuff. So yeah, that's what I wore on my birthday, and if I were celebrating yours with you up in Iowa, this weekend,
I
I'd be wearing
I
that
would
T-shirt as well.
love to share my crawfish boil with you, Alvaro Bedoya.
So Max, our phone number, if you want to ask us a question, 920, remind me, 920.
920 we fight if you're doing it on a phone that has the letters on it, but that's 920-933-4448.
We
And,
are,
we
go
got
ahead.
over spring break, Alvaro, we got a couple of calls from people. Really appreciate it. If you wanna yell at me, tell me how much I'm,
You specifically want to yell at Max.
I reposted about, Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax, and saying that every patriotic American should, support this, and boy, did I get flamed. So, I mean, if you wanna call in and tell me how I'm a commie because I wanna tax, 1 cent over $50,000,000, for every dollar over $50,000,000, you pay 1 cent in on taxes, but apparently that makes me a commie,
You're a
for
radical,
doing
Max.
that.
You're a
I'm a
radical.
radical. Well,
Um,
I am.
on that from my friends, we will not be back next week. We'll be back 1 week after that. And in the meantime, we hope you're hanging in there. We hope that you're enjoying the show and that you are keeping your head above water, folks.
Listening. Have a great weekend and keep on fighting for fairness.